Are you tired of your builds looking like this and want them more to look like this? Well, then stay tuned, guys, because in this video I'm going to be showing you how you can improve your builds in 5+ tips. And with just a little bit of practice, you can make your builds start looking like this right here. Anyways, guys, my name is Novenady, and let's go ahead and get right into the video. So let me go ahead and start off this video by saying I'm in no way at all a professional builder. I've been playing Minecraft since 2011, so I do have some experience in my hands, and I do know a little bit of the ropes and what to do. So that is the reason I'm making this video in general, is because I can help you guys out and giving you guys some tips. Of course, this isn't going to be the best tutorial out there. Of course, there are more. But I know there is a ton of people out there that are looking just for some basic tips on how they can improve their builds in just the simplest ways. So let's go ahead and start off with tip number one. Tip number one, guys, shape is everything. And I really do mean shape is everything. If you start off with a square box, you're already setting yourself up for failure. So you might as well go ahead and try adding just a little bit of shape to your builds, even if it's just an extra corner that you add on. Literally, that is how I started out all of my builds. I started off with a square box like this, but eventually I started branching out and adding maybe just a little bit of an L shape, something like this right here. If you go ahead and add yourself even just an L shape, you're already doing much better than just a square box. Of course, there is a ton more that you can do to it. As seen here, you can do tons of shapes and make them really extravagant and kind of do your own thing with it. Of course, you don't want to go overboard and make just like a ton of different shapes and things like that, but it's always good to try stuff that's new. So don't be afraid to try something new, because that's the only way you're going to get better at building. This leads me into my second tip: planning. Make sure you plan your builds, guys. Don't be afraid to add in where you're going to have walls on the interior, because that's even going to help you whenever you're going to build your exterior, and kind of how you want to be able to see the walls on the inside, and how you can start setting your depth for your build as well, which we'll get into in the next tip. But if you don't plan your builds, you're going to end up having some weird numbers and things like that whenever it comes to actually building the main build itself. So just a couple rules I like to keep in mind whenever I'm building my builds is make sure that you have odd number blocks whenever you're doing a wall. I always like to have a center point. I don't like having a double point or a double peaked roof. I think it looks a bit weird. And of course, you know, I've definitely messed up in the past where I have accidentally made it a 2-block center, which is fine. It can challenge you, and it can actually end up looking pretty decent in the end. And I'm not saying don't do a 2-block center at all. I'm just saying it will be a ton easier if you have a 1-block center. It makes it so much easier whenever it comes to roofs and just making stuff look more even and doing more detail inside of your builds. So on top of planning, guys, make sure you plan your color palette. Color palette has a big difference whenever it comes to how your build is going to look in the end. And there's tons of color palettes out here. These are just a couple that I enjoy using whenever it comes to my builds. And obviously on the far right there, you can see the dark oak stripped, and spruce, which I am actually using right now in my hardcore world. If you've seen my previous survival series that I did here on this channel, which never actually got finished, I actually used the second to the right, which was the stripped whatever this stuff is called. I never remember this, stripped warped log or whatever. And then the diorite and the dark oak. It actually looks really cool whenever it all comes together. And these two here I actually combined for a house right back there, and even added in some of the stripped crimson, which ended up looking amazing whenever I got done. And you wouldn't think dirt would look good on a build. It can. It really just depends on how you use it. And of course, you're not going to get block palettes right away, so don't be afraid to play around and experiment with them. But these here are just a few basic ones. If you guys want to use them, feel free. Everyone loves these. I don't know someone who doesn't like using these, unless you hate diorite, which is completely understandable. Diorite definitely isn't a pretty block, but if you use it right, it can look very good. Now that you have your planning done, you have your shaping done, and you have a block palette, of course you're going to want to start building up your walls, but don't build up your walls just yet. You need to plan for depth, which I talked about in a couple of tips ago. I think it was tip number 2, where I was talking about shape, and then I kind of briefly mentioned depth. Depth has a lot to do with your build. Now, in my survival series that I'm doing now, my hardcore series, I'm actually doing a ton of builds that are kind of flat, and that's kind of my mistake. I enjoy doing builds with a lot more depth, but I've been kind of just experimenting, seeing what I can do to spice up a flatter wall, and just kind of playing around with it. And sometimes it can turn out really cool. It really just depends on how you do it. Of course, over here you can see where I added in a ton more detail, and all I did was bring out the spruce logs one block. So instead of having them set flush with your main exterior wall, just bring it out and kind of have it pop out like that, and then you can actually do things like this, adding in trap doors, some stairs. You can even do stairs underneath the windows and kind of make like this oval shape, which I do a ton in my builds. I think it just looks really nice, and it's an easy pattern repeat, and it just looks good in the end. Now on top of that, there are other designs you can do, such as having these log pop outs, which I do quite often as well, and doing some of these trapdoors underneath some of these fence gates underneath these trapdoors, and it can kind of add a little bit more detail, as you can see here, which I absolutely love. Now, if you do decide to go ahead and do a flush wall, it's perfectly fine. There are tons of ways to spice it up, and here is just a quick little example. You can do some of these pop-out logs that I did here, as well as down here on the bottom, add some stairs on top of those, and then connect it up with some trapdoors, which you don't have to do trapdoors. You can leave the trapdoors out. It still looks perfectly fine. And then you can even still do the stairs underneath like so for your windows and things like that. So just a few little things that you can add in to a flush wall to make it look a bit nicer. Next thing that I want to go ahead and talk about, and this is one thing that bugs me, is your window placement. Now obviously you don't want to have these huge windows, which I see all the time, but you also don't want to place your windows in the wrong spots. So if you look at your interior, you want to base a good chunk of your windows off of the way that your interior is going to be planned out. Of course, I don't have it planned out over here because it's me, and I would never do that. But there are ways that you can do it without having to plan your interior. Basically, one good rule of thumb is on your interior, make sure that it is set at least one block off the wall here. Because if wrong thing. If we go ahead and move this one block over, and let's say we want to do a double window like this, on your interior that's not going to look too good. I always like to have a good block or so from each wall of my off my window, and then on the exterior it still looks good, and then on the interior it's going to look awesome once you go to plan your interior, and you won't have any windows butting up against the wall. So now that you have your color palette, how you're going to be decorating your exterior, and just some detailing tips, and you've kind of been playing around with your detailing and what you want to do there are some rules whenever it comes to your roofs. Obviously you don't want a roof that looks like this. This looks absolutely awful, and tons of new people who are starting out do roofs that look like this. If I can give one tip to anybody who is starting out on Minecraft, do not do this. This is the worst way to get into building or anything like that. This is just, it's gonna look awful. Now don't get me wrong, if you're starting out here, that is perfectly fine. I started out here, and pretty much everyone who starts Minecraft starts out like this with your roofs, but there's a much better way, and that is stairs. Of course, stairs can be a little bit difficult whenever you begin in Minecraft, but there are some pretty easy ways to do it in survival, and I'll go ahead and give those tips quickly. So let's pretend we didn't have this roof here like this. Now obviously this is a 2-block center, which I absolutely hate, but I was just trying to get this ready for you guys so you can see what it looks like. Well, actually we can go ahead and fix that real quick by doing something like that right there. So first tip that I can go ahead and give, if you're doing this in survival, make sure whenever you go to build your wall, let's say you have it flat out like this. Well, if you know that you want to have a roof here, let's say go ahead and add in how you want your roof to be peaked. Of course, there are other roofs you can do something like that. You can do a 2-block step and then one, but just for now and for time's sake and for beginner's sake, I'm just going to do a 1 step for each. So make sure you go ahead and place where you would want that to be filled in there. So as in for here, I went ahead and placed these here, and that is the exact same thing that I would go ahead and do in survival. Of course, I'm a little bit more advanced now, so I don't really need that. And once you begin getting into Minecraft and building and things like that, it becomes a lot easier to where you won't have to do things like this. Now, My first little tip for building in survival that I can give is just make sure you're always pressing shift. It gets a little bit difficult if you release shift and you're falling down and you start getting frustrated and you keep going off and things like that. So my first little tip that I can go ahead and give you is make sure you're pressing shift and go ahead and do some upside down stairs, right side upstairs, upside down stairs, right side upstairs, and then go ahead and repeat on this side. Normal stair, upside down, right side up, upside down, right side up. Of course, the stairs can glitch sometimes and you will fall off, but that's just nature to happen, and it's bound to happen every now and again. It happens to me all the time, but it is what it is, and practice makes better. I wouldn't say perfect, but it definitely makes you better. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into what I believe is the final tip. Final tip that I can go ahead and give you, and you saw it right there as I was building, make sure you have your roofs hang over one. No one wants to see a roof that looks like this. Let me show you guys real quick. No one wants to see a roof that looks like this. Let's see. I don't even know how you do it. I guess you could do a slab here. No one wants to see a roof that looks like this. That just, it doesn't look good. So, like I said, have it stick out by one. It will look a ton better in the future. Something like that. Look at that. Already looks so much better. Now, before I go, guys, I have one extra kind of like thrown in there kind of tip. Don't do a single color roof. Try to spruce it up and find, like I said, your matching color palette and throw in a bit of a border going around with a darker color, and then do your lighter color here in the center. I think it turns out looking so much better on your builds whenever you do stuff like that. If this video has helped you out in any way, shape, or form, guys, make sure you let me know down in the comments below and hit that like button. So I know you guys want to see more content like this, more tips, tricks, whatever you want to call them. And if you want to see a more in-depth video where I go in and actually build with you guys and show the kind of thinking process behind my building, let me know down in the comments below as well. Anyways, guys, I believe this is where I'm going to go ahead and end the video. So make sure, as always, stay awesome, stay beautiful, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.